Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Joe Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me is Mark Marex, senior index specialist with Nasdaq Index Research, to discuss AlphaDex small cap performance. Mark, let's walk through your first couple of charts here and get a look at longer term and more recent performance of these indexes.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me, Jill. Wanted to point out this suite to our viewers and listeners because it really captures, I think, what's happening in the small cap space more generally. Size being one of those factor strategies that maybe we don't talk about as much as value or growth. But you can see here on this first slide, what we're showing is the Nasdaq AlphaDex small cap core index, along with its kind of growth and value spin-off factor indexes, and this is performance since the beginning of 2020. So it captures that bear market in March of last year when the pandemic hit, and then the overall recovery. And you can see growth is actually still on top here, up about 46%, with the core strategy up about 43%, value is 38%, and then all three of those really are outperforming the Russell 2000 broad small cap benchmark. Not by a ton, but pretty significantly. But let's go to the next slide and start talking about the more recent story with small cap and value in particular.
Yeah, and we could take a look at that. As you had said, more recent performance, we could take a deeper dive in the near term.
Yeah, so what I've done here is just looking at since end of September of last year. That was really what we identified as kind of the big turning point in the market in terms of the reflation trade, the reopening trade getting going, and really starting to benefit value strategies of all different stripes, whether you're large cap, small cap, multi-cap, U.S., international. So look at the performance comparison here. And this kind of gives you a different lens of viewing what value and growth have been doing more broadly, but also within the small cap space. So value for AlphaDex small cap up 71% since end of September versus only 47% for the Russell 2000 small cap, 45% for the Nasdaq AlphaDex small cap growth. So a huge divergence in performance. You can see that core strategy is kind of in the middle now at 60%. So again, depending on the timeline you take to look at the performance within this space, if you're capturing the downturn from last year, which really kind of accelerated the long-running underperformance of value temporarily until that reflation trade got going, you'll come to some pretty different conclusions at how these strategies have relatively performed against each other.
And Mark, what sectors make up the AlphaDex small cap sectors indexes?
Yeah. So I mean, looking at the sectors, I think the main takeaway here, and this is something I always try to contextualize for people, is that value versus growth. It is a difference in factor strategies, but it's to a large extent a sector story. So just look at the biggest thing that jumps out here is the yellow, right? That's the financials allocation. You look at the small cap core strategy, it's 29% financials. That's approximately double what you get with small cap growth, 15%. Small cap value, you're up at almost 40% financials, and you see that the offsets, the much lower offsets, are in those kind of growthier sectors like tech, like consumer services, which have had an incredible run. And I feel like people making this calculation of, well, is it value's turn to outperform for several years or maybe a decade versus growth, which has really dominated for a long time now? It's much more of a sector question. It's like, are financials, materials, commodities related things going to outperform tech and consumer sectors for a long time to come? It's a trade right now. I think it's a good trade to be long those value and those sector areas, but it remains to be seen, if it's a decade-long type of trade where it can undo what's happened over the past decade.
And finally, what are you seeing with assets under management and trends there?
Yeah, so this suite, the AlphaDex suite, has a group of First Trust ETF products tracking it. What I'm showing here is just a 3-year trend, so you can see in the purple, that's the core strategy that is, pretty decently up 164% in AUM terms year over year, getting close to $1 billion. In terms of growth, we're up 272% year over year, up to almost $500 million. But again, I think the real story is with value. That blue line was limping along for years, not seeing much in terms of flows or performance, up almost 600% year over year, combination of performance and strong flows. So we're definitely starting to see some attention with it. It's not just broad value, it's small cap value in particular. And we'll look to continue tracking this space to see how it continues evolving.
All right, Mark, appreciate the insight as always. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.